Happy Thursday and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, an airplane nerd from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And Jim, here we are at minute 49.
Yes.
We're coming up on the halfway point here before too much longer.
Yeah, it's just, I was thinking this was going to crawl, but we've been flying through these things. And
absolutely have.
The end isn't near, but you can see it from here. So.
Yeah, exactly. I'm already starting to get the post-Rocketeer minute blues.
Well, it's still a cheery day here in
that's true.
In sunny, well, we're not in LA, but the movie is.
The movie is.
We're watching. Well, we're still back with Fitch and Wooly, FBI agents, all going through. They've shown up at the Bigelow offices, or the offices of Bigelow Aeronautics, to find out what's going on with Bigelow, and they found a very messed up room. And the two, so they're wandering around, and Wooly's trying to make out what's under the desk. So he tells Fitch, get a light over there. So he turns on the desk lamp. And we get to see the final performance of John Polito in this movie.
Yes, and presumably not his own foot.
Hopefully not. Or
hopefully not.
He's wearing it on his arm. Because
right.
He's,
yes. Super. A lot of, I don't know. It's a stunt foot. I'm just going to assume that.
Yeah.
And, there's that on the floor around him, there's a Bigelow Air Circus invoice that's stamped paid. And I just can't quite make out what that's for, but I've always been curious about that. I wonder what little bit of set dressing that was.
300 gallons of gas.
300 gallons of gas, probably, yeah. So,
but yeah, somewhere somebody out. Well, I think we know a couple of people who might have it. So
I was going to say, at this point, I'm just going to assume that Mike Bruno has that invoice and be weirdly surprised if he does not. And very quickly, speaking of some friends of ours that are listening, a quick shout out and re-apology to Adam and Jamie Hicks for mixing their names around on Tuesday's episode. We've already followed up on this on Facebook, and they have decided that they're cousins, and that the Rocketeer Minute is doing nothing but just bringing family together. So
one big happy family. That's the way it goes.
Exactly. That's right, Uncle Jim.
Yeah. Wow. So Fitch gets upset about the whole thing when he sees it, but Wooly gets even more upset. He yells out "Mother of Mercy," which may indicate his Catholic background. His name's Wooly, but Wolanski is his full name, so he is possibly of Polish descent, which might tie in. This is kind of a long way around the barn, but follow me here. Mother of Mercy.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. Mother of Mercy, the term for the Virgin Mary in the Catholic Church, was originated by Saint Bridget of Sweden, but made most popular by a sister and later Saint Faustina of Warsaw, Poland. At the time, we're in 1938 here. There was a nun in Plock, Poland, who had multiple apparitions of Jesus and Mary. And she was trying to describe the images that she was seeing, but she was a terrible artist in her own words. She wrote in her diary that she didn't know how to draw. So she asked everybody in her convent if anybody else knew how to sketch. And they finally found a neighboring priest who did know how to do artwork. And she described the vision that she was having, and this priest carefully drew it out. And now this particular painting, which is in Poland, is known as the painting of Divine Mercy. And Faustina became increasingly ill from 1935 through 1938, passing away 10 days before the setting of this particular scene, October of 1938. So very, very popular in the Polish community. She was finally canonized in the year 2000 and is now known as Saint Faustina. So the phrase "Mother of Mercy" would probably be highly it would be on the minds of many in the Polish community. Although I don't know how far it extended to Los Angeles, but this could be through where Wolanski came from. And I would have no doubts that Dave Stevens had carefully researched this and knew what to put in the script for that. And we'll have to ask Danny Bilson when hopefully we'll have him on shortly to ask him how much Dave had put some of these details in there.
Absolutely, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. And then I have to wonder if this nun said she was a terrible artist. I wonder if she was any sort of spiritual connection to Cecilia Jimenez, who very famously, quote unquote, restored that fresco in somewhere in Spain, if I remember right. And
rather did the Ziggy treatment on it.
exactly. Yes, everybody's head is just a big circle.
Wow. Yeah. So oh well. Have a nice day.
Yes. Have a nice day. Go to the complaint department.
But the things that you learn on this show, that's
absolutely that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of. I was sort of vaguely aware, superficially, or Mother of Mercy. I presumed it would have been referring to Mary and likely a Catholic expression, but I didn't know there was such a distinct and literal and frankly contemporary, at least as far as the film is concerned, etymology to it.
Yeah, I was surprised too as I started examining these things. It was like, oh, it was that recent, and then it was that involved, and especially with the character Volansky. So it was, most of the time, I think when we're researching the background of this thing, that's usually the final
yes
interjection that we have. It's like, oh, look at that.
Right. It's all about getting to the
Yeah. So.
And we had this show try to take you there with us.
Yeah.
Whether you want to go or not.
It's all a matter of detective work, which our good friends Fitch and Woolley are doing here. Woolley picks up that pad of paper, that Bigelow pad of paper, which I think is still available. Is that correct?
So for a while you could actually go to the Joe Johnston sketchbooks, Joe Johnston's official site, and he still had sheets of this stationery, and then a larger version. If I remember, it has a colored logo, and you can actually buy sheets of either one. They were sort of, each individual sheet, not necessarily screen used, but part of the pads that they would have made for screen use, and he'll even sign them and things. Now, last that I looked, only the larger version was available, but this smaller one, maybe he's run out of them. But interesting to see, a great little logo with the swooping airplane on it, and interesting to see this is Bigelow Aeronautical Corporation, and then in the background we see some of the Bigelow Air Circus stationery, and so certainly the Air Circus would be presumably this, that's the event that's under the umbrella of the Aeronautical Corporation, which now belongs to Otis Bigelow's heirs, whoever they may be.
Yeah.
So,
maybe he gave it to Millie.
That very well could be. He left it to Millie. I'd like to think that he left it to Patsy.
Yeah, that would be
and
nice.
That we're going to be, seeing Patsy's Air Circus coming up pretty soon.
She could be the next Rocketeer. Who knows?
Well, that very well could be. She was.
I was thinking about this pad of paper, and if I did order from the Joe Johnston sketchbook, I don't think I'd want him to autograph it. I think I'd want him to write on one piece of paper and write 1635 Palm Terrace and give me the paper underneath.
That would be perfect. Then see if he's the one who wrote it. See if that was his handwriting or not. That would be pretty interesting.
Okay.
I was just going to say, and then as we're zoomed in on this, number one, how brilliantly shot is it that and lit that you can read the address on camera just as the impression in the paper.
Yeah.
That just seems like that would have been, you could do that and then try all day to take a picture of it and struggle mightily to get the lighting right. And then, of course, the framing of as we dissolve to the next scene where that writing lines up just all but perfectly.
Yeah, and it was one take because once he crumpled that paper, you can't uncrumple it.
Yeah, exactly.
Racking the focus to the mailbox.
Right. Yeah, that is such a neat shot.
And then of course Lothar heading for that beautiful classic California bungalow.
Yeah.
Which we didn't really talk about the first time. We talked a little bit about the arts and crafts movement and things like that, but I like to get into it a little bit here more.
Sure.
This is truly an American. It's an American. The American Craftsman home is kind of a purely American thing. Although it has its roots. The word bungalow is from an Indian word, Asian Indian word. The British believed in these short cabins that the Indians had built as housing, and it much like IPA, they transferred the knowledge that they gained and the rocket. They transferred the knowledge they gained from their colonization of India over to Britain, and then the British ideas of bungalows were changed by the Americans who had seen them in the 1880s or so. They started coming over here in the 1880s. The way that they were built in India, they had native. They were built by native labor. They had these big verandas, which are or porches on the front, and the huge overhanging eaves, which became the American front porch. What that was for in hot summer days, you get a lot of cool air blowing across a large area of the front of the house, so it kept it cool in warmer places. Where we usually use the term now, bungalow is typically for like a beach location, and it's kind of a temporary summer house. These homes built in the sweltering heat of Los Angeles were very popular because pretty much year round you're either sweltering or you're getting rained on, so you need a good long roof with a dry area in front of your house. The particular house that we're looking at here in Palm Terrace is in Hollywood. It's up in the hills, not too far from Griffith Park, where we'll be later in the show. But that style there was very popular around 1908 to say the end of World War I. Two men, Charles and Henry Green, looked at turning. They had originally built like Queen Anne style homes, but they changed them into this Craftsman built home. This whole Craftsman movement, popularized by kit houses from Sears. They were reproducible, easily made by local talent, and very very artistic and very pleasing. I mean, if you've ever been in a Craftsman-style home, it's very very comfortable. You feel very. It's very relaxed. It's not It doesn't have that formal look of what was popular in New England with the colonial style homes or the Federalist style homes of George Washington that way. This was more of a tropical or semi-tropical type house, and it has more of a feel of like a chalet, like a ski chalet or like the French chalet or the Swiss chalet style.
Sure.
And
well, it's very much a PV house in my mind.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I've always assumed this has been PV's house for a long time, and that Cliff is a roommate. It could be the other way around, but
yeah, no, it's and also where they're at, Los Angeles, Pasadena, and those kind of areas. That was it was more for the Hollywood types. It's more of a resort area. It's kind of a place where you went to if another idea was health, that you had fresh air blowing through.
Oh, sure.
So that made it good.
Although, Jim, when you say Hollywood types, I believe you mean them phony balonies.
Yeah, them phony balonies.
Yes.
And wouldn't they be them Hollywood land phony balonies?
The Hollywood land phony balonies. Yeah, that's right. For a little while yet, for another 40 minutes, 50 minutes or so, it'll be Hollywood land.
There was a fellow, of course I've forgotten his first name, was Stickley, and Stickley actually had his own magazine called The Craftsman, and he promoted this idea of the American bungalow as a craftsman home as what you wanted in living. The three principles of the design were simplicity, harmony with nature, and the promotion of craftsmanship. Like everywhere you go, look at those doors, look at the way the beveling is. Just because they're simple and it's casual doesn't mean that it doesn't show a high degree of skill with
sure.
Things like the beadboard, the ceilings of the porch, the front porch, and things like that. In this case, there's kind of a pergola type on one section. And it really became a very popular style that went. It stayed around for about. By the time they got to the 30s, though, this bungalow Craftsman style was kind of getting dated. A lot of people had moved from the east to the west, so they wanted the houses they were more familiar with. So things like colonial style homes, 2-story homes that really didn't fit in with the landscape. Had to get built because people were moving from like New England, New York, generally the East Coast moving to the West Coast. So that kind of altered. You started seeing Georgian style homes and Federalist style homes that appeared, and especially in places like Beverly Hills, where all the Hollywood phony balonies were moving.
Yes,
but that was considered more of a luxury thing, and then these bungalow styles were considered more of a middle class type of a dwelling. Even though, it was, it's a very egalitarian idea that people like Frank Lloyd Wright pushed, the prairie style.
Sure.
This is all seen here. And just more workaday. and was by the time Peavy and Cliff were living here, this was considered a little bit lower class area than, say, someplace that we've seen the other extreme of the Frank Lloyd Wright, where Neville Sinclair lived.
Yes, that is the opposite end,
but both influenced by the same architect, so just kind of odd.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So this house could be, 20, maybe as much as 30 years old at this point.
Sure.
Contemporarily, something like that.
Easily, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just love the clutter in there. You feel like when you go inside there, you feel very much at home. They don't have any room for anything, but he works on the dining room table and gets all of his gear in line.
He's got the X3 on one chair and then the helmet staring him right in the face for inspiration.
Yeah, a cup of coffee and some carpenter's pencils there, and what looks like that's an angle. I forget now. It's not a protractor, but it's he's measuring angles, obviously.
Oh,
and,
right.
He hears somebody lumbering outside.
Yes.
And goes for the nearest personal protection tool, which in this case is a ball-peen hammer, which actually makes total sense because a ball-peen hammer is what you use for metalwork. Peening the ball on the back there is what you use to bang out the curves. And in the process, you're hardening the metal, so you make it stiffer and less bendy. If people of my age would remember going to summer camp and making ashtrays with that very tool.
Interesting.
Out of pieces of aluminum or stainless steel.
Yeah, so presumably he would have shaped the helmet designs with some of that.
Probably knocked the dings out of the X3.
Right. Yeah, knocked a few dings out of the X3, and but now, as you say, he's reaching to it for home defense.
Yeah.
It's also an interesting aside in this segment. He's sitting there, he's drawing, he's got all his books open, and I've not been able to look closely enough or see quite enough detail to see if I recognize any of these books. We just see enough to see tables of numbers and some formulae and things like that. But he's talking about thrust, and he says, thrust 128 inches per second, which that would be, I don't need to tell you, Mr. Rocket Scientist, that would be, of course, a measure of acceleration.
Yeah.
Or at least velocity, if not acceleration. You would need a second time component for acceleration, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But whereas thrust is normally just measured in weight or mass.
Or seconds. If you're trying to go for impulse, you're trying to figure like total impulse. If he's thinking of thrust, he would actually consider impulse, and impulse is always a function of seconds. So he doesn't really. I don't want to go into the impulse equation here, but yeah, it's.
And just on the airplane side, when we talk about more in turbine engines, jet engines, like we talk about thrust, we just tend to talk about pounds of thrust. This engine is capable of putting out, 1,000 pounds of thrust or 10,000 pounds of thrust, something like that. But we can forgive Peavy just some interesting units while he's musing out loud, especially given that he's a little nervous about what's about to happen here as he grabs his ball-peen hammer.
Yeah. So, he's also thinking about the total impulse required for him to get up and get out of the way.
Right. There's also that. Not to mention the fact that this this whole rocket pack caper hasn't exactly brought him a lot of good fortune so far.
Yeah. I keep thinking about you. What do you do if you have a 7-foot tall guy lurking about?
Right.
And he does. I'm trying to he does know that he's wanted. I'm trying to figure out how much level of danger does he think he's in.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point because there hasn't been that much. As we bounce around here, Peavy hasn't really seen much of an overt threat other than, he knows that they've borrowed this thing without anybody's permission, which they call stealing.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, he knows we're probably not supposed to have this thing, but it hasn't really brought a world of hurt down on him yet, has it? At this point in the film.
He's about to meet a Frankenstein gentleman shortly.
Yes, exactly. And at about second 55, when you see Tiny Ron's hand go over that doorknob.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
That is just ridiculous. It's like... It's like a polar bear or something.
Yeah, it's like he's opening a Barbie's Malibu dream house.
Yeah,
no. One of those, the doorknob is just incredibly tiny in Tiny Ron's hands.
You want to think that was a scaled down doorknob, but I'm sure it wasn't. He was a big, or excuse me, he is a big guy.
Yeah, and he just gets there just in time to have our hero Cliff show up on his motorcycle. Which, by the way, this is a great view. If you stop around Second 58, it is a great view of the underside of that Craftsman-style house. When you look at
Sure.
things, just simple things like the soffits and that beautiful spar varnished ceiling on the side porch there. It's just
And
gorgeous
just
house.
the presence of multiple porches, and it really is just a beautiful bit of design. Now, I wonder, since we know from a few minutes from now, that a lot of the front of this house was a facade for effects purposes. I wonder how much of that is facade, or how much the real house looks like this. I'd like to think it looks just like this, and we'd recognize it if we drove by. But
I am hoping that I know our many fans that listen to this, someone may have production pictures of 1635 Palm Terrace as it was being refitted for this shoot. And if they have any pictures and they'd love to share it with us, please do, because we would love to share it with everybody else.
Right.
Hal, you do know something about that motorcycle that I probably don't.
Yeah, I won't claim any particular special expertise, but I did find a little bit of history about it. Motorcycles are one of those things that I tried to sort of keep at arm's length, because I'm used to being sort of a vehicle nerd around airplanes, and then to a much smaller extent certain cars, and then ocean liners and things. Motorcycles, I can just point at and say, oh, that one looks cool. But that's about the extent of my in-depth knowledge. But this one in particular, it's a Harley-Davidson, built in 1929. And it's an SDH, or excuse me, JDH. Can't even read my own notes here. It's a twin-cam motorcycle. And this was Harley's consumer model that they put out basically in response to so many of their customers wanting to buy a motorcycle that performed like the racing motorcycles that Harley had been building. So Harley finally sort of gave in and said, okay, here's one that's basically, here's a street model, but it's just as good as the racers we've done. So new in 1929, this would have sold for $385. Wow. That's about $5,300 today. So it actually that part of it seems cheap, but when you compare it to a Model A at the time, and I'm sorry, so the motorcycle sold for $370. A Model A, the entry-level Model A Ford, at the same year, sold for $385. So there's almost the same price as a car, which
that's like a year's worth of clown shows.
Yeah, exactly. And assuming you don't run into any trucks and blow anything up. Now the individual motorcycle you see on film here. Is that, as is so often the case, multiple owners over the years. But one of the things I thought was interesting is, for a while it was owned by a guy named Bud Eakins, and Bud was a stunt rider and driver, worked in a lot of films. So if you remember the classic motorcycle scene in The Great Escape.
Right.
So that's Bud doing the riding in that. Now, that's not this motorcycle, but this motorcycle was part of his collection. Bud also drove the Ford Mustang and Bullitt. Ah. So two of the most iconic sort of, ground-based transportation-related scenes in mid-century movie history. So Bud had this in his collection, and then he sold it to a museum in Oxnard, California. That was a museum that was started because a guy named Otis Chandler had so many cool things in his collection that the only way he could continue justifying it was a museum. So I'm wondering if Mike Bruno is listening. Let's get your museum going there, buddy. So Otis Chandler owned it, and then it was sort of re-restored by a guy named Glenn Bader, who is apparently still out there, still very active in the motorcycle restoration business. But it was while it was owned by that museum that it was hired out for this movie. Then after this movie, it went to Italy, somewhere in Italy, and then ended up, at least as of a few years ago, it ended up in Melbourne, Australia. So
world traveler.
Yeah, this bike has been, at least halfway around the world so far. So, and it likely started just a little bit south of me in down in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
It is a beautiful bike and a great sound. I mean,
yeah, when it comes rolling up,
is so great. Yeah, just that boom, 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 boom. And so
that's the best motorcycle impersonation I've heard all day, Jim. I want you to know.
I try.
Yes, you always deliver, my friend.
Well, I just keep picturing every time you're holding the toy planes up on your desk. There's a lot of room.
There is a lot of that going on. Yes, unquestionably.
Well, so we're gonna. Everything seems to be set in place for something to happen.
Right, and so what I'm trying to figure out. Let me scrub back here real quick before we get away. So Tiny Ron is trying the door. May or may not have actually opened it yet. So when Cliff comes up on the motorcycle, so number one, we have to ask Billy if he's wearing suspenders or something. If you look as the back of his jacket is lifted up. But setting that aside, in the shot where we see Billy, where is Tiny Ron right now? Is
he's in the back of the house. If you
Okay.
watch around second 42, you'll see his shadow pass across the front porch. So,
sure. Okay, so he's going...
He's gone around the back of the house where they will later be exiting in a few minutes.
Right, so he's gone basically off to the right of this frame, of this scene.
Right, he's on the opposite corner.
The opposite corner from where Cliff has just ridden up.
Yeah.
And then, yes, as you say, we will see that sort of back door and that back alley entrance and a moderately interested neighbor.
Yes.
Doesn't seem to be too eager to offer any assistance of any kind, but he's out to look around and see what's what. So we've got that to look forward to.
Yeah, but for this final second, we just get to enjoy one last look at that beautiful house.
Yes,
as the before
right,
picture.
the before picture.
I do love that hearth, which is the large fireplace that's in the front there, is a key feature of Craftsman homes from the Frank Lloyd Wright playbook. Frank Lloyd Wright believed that the hearth was the center of the American home, and it was always part of a great room, and it formed basically the spine of the house. If you look at most of the later, it began in the prairie style homes, but as he moved into what was known as the Usonian, Usonian for United States Onion type homes, you'll notice any of their layouts, the fireplace is the center of the home and everything hangs off of the fireplace. So this was, even though this wasn't a Frank Lloyd Wright, this is coming from all the other Craftsman guys who are saying you need to have a spine to your house, and that's an early, this 1908 one here, this is an early development of that idea of a Usonian spine based on the hearth. Yeah,
it's fascinating to think of. As architecture developed like this, that you had these principles coming into play, and obviously, we've had different types of architecture going back hundreds and hundreds of years, in Gothic styles and this styles, but so many of them, and I really don't know what I'm talking about here, but so many sort of when you think about Gothic style and Renaissance and things like this, it tends to refer mostly to just aesthetics. But when you're talking about this, we're talking about the home having a spine. It seems like we've transitioned to defining a style not by its superficial appearance, but by its design, its sort of form following the function, and defining it as not just what it looks like, but how you're going to use it.
Yeah, it's the bones of the typical phrase that I hear from people doing architecture stuff. It's the bones of the house, and you're looking at, if you look at the basic bones of a bungalow. This is it in spades. I mean, it's just the windows, the idea of letting all the light, as much light in as you can, and gosh, I want to move there.
Yeah, no kidding. What are we waiting for?
Yeah. It's just a complete lack of storage space.
Maybe it's got a huge basement.
Yeah, that's true.
That's one thing. Starting on the West Coast and then moving here to the Midwest a few years ago, I was not prepared for the fact that any place you look has a gigantic basement.
Yeah.
And, I assumed that, move into a smaller place for a little while, relocating 3,000 miles, 2,000 miles, whatever, and that we'd need to go rent a storage unit. And then we walk down, there's this basement. They could put a city down there. So, and it's all about tornado shelters in this part of the country.
That's true. Well, and model railroading.
And model railroading, yes.
But yeah, it's great. You see this thing, and I can understand why there's an HGTV. I mean, I love looking at houses, and here's just an opportunity in this little Disney
Right.
film.
And very quickly bouncing back, we talked about the price of the motorcycle, the price of a Model A. And now we're talking about houses. One note I had made that I didn't mention is here in 1929. So when that motorcycle was new and that Model A was selling for $385, average house prices in the U.S. would have been between $2,000 and $3,000. Just so people have a little bit of perspective there.
Yeah.
So, more than 10% of the cost of your house on a motorcycle.
Wow.
Go figure.
Well, yeah. It happens, but anyway, this is a beautiful minute, and again, this is one of the perfect minutes for seeing how many different directions this movie goes.
Absolutely, and Jim, I'm sorry, I just saw one other note, and I'm going to kick myself if I don't toss this one out there. So forgive me for being all over the map tonight.
No, it's okay.
But speaking of all over the map, we talked about the Bigelow stationery. And in this scene, in this minute, we see the smaller version. If you go to Joe Johnston's sketchbook, you see the larger version. The larger version has an address on it. And the street address is 17533 Sepulveda Boulevard. And so I threw that into Google Maps. And that is, it's a spot on Sepulveda right off the one, as they say in California. And it's... right now, sort of the nearest thing on the map closest to that street number is one of a rare thing these days, but it's a viewpoint for watching airplanes at LAX, which is right across the road.
Really?
So
it's not. Yeah, it must be right near there's an In-N-Out on Sepulveda right there, just off the.
This is half a block from that In-N-Out burger.
Been there many times.
The viewpoint is in fact like halfway between the In-N-Out burger and where Google Maps drops this pin. But interesting too that we know that the
Chaplain
new mayor
Field apparently was assumed by
assumed by LAX as the new mayor of Los Angeles. He's been in office for a few weeks, as was just about to get started on LAX at about this time. Wow. So. Anyway, another little nice touch department.
Rather famous picture is taken just about where that spot is. That's the beautiful picture that's been reprinted everywhere of Endeavour and two T-38s flying in on the back of the 905 747 as Endeavour reaches its new home at the California Science Center.
And they had no idea that they were offering a salute to the in 1938, the newly late Otis Bigelow.
Yeah, who, by the way, is now at our body count so far is 3. So we've lost Lenny, we've lost Wilmer, and now Bigelow.
Wow.
So we'll have to see. Hopefully this is the end of the death toll, but I have a feeling there's more will die before this movie is over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tune in tomorrow.
On that somber note.
Yeah.
Yes. And then tomorrow for the Death Minute.
Yes. So we'll be talking about that as we finish up the week. But please, as is our want, we always ask you to go to social media to find us, and I will go through this as quickly as possible. But I will mention that you do have to go to Twitter. Find us at Rocketeer Minute. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Rocketeer Minute, and of course the great big site RocketeerMinute.com. Get all these previous episodes. Look for other pictures that we put up from our super collectors out there. Who provide us with very rare glimpses and views of the production of this show and different things, ephemera that survived this movie. So check out the big site at RocketeerMinute.com. Please, if you haven't already, go to iTunes or to Google Play. Leave us a great review and then click the subscribe button when you type in Rocketeer Minute on the search bar and click on us. That's about it, and we will finish up the week tomorrow as we say farewell to. Well, actually, it's if this were an HGTV, this would be where where they're turning a house into a gazebo.
Exactly.
So, join us for the ever popular gazebo making episode.
The big reveal.
Yes, minute 50 tomorrow on the Rocketeer Minute. So until next time, over and out.